Meet other people where they are. Make sure that you speak their language. What is up, champions? Welcome to another episode of Champion Reads, where we talk about best-selling books and their best principles to help you out with your best life. I am your host, Coach Willie Blake, and today I'm also met, who will be up on the screen in a minute, Mr. John Kovacs Jr., the founder of Champion Circle. And in today's book, we covered it last time, which is Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. And today we're going to jump into a principle that I don't think is talked about a lot in the speaking realm. If you're a speaker, you might have heard about this, but otherwise this isn't a topic or a principle that pops up often. It's to speak at the level of which your audience is at. Speak in their language. As a speaker myself, I can tell you how important it is to speak in other people's language. If you want to sell something as a marketer, if you want to impact someone as a speaker, the best way to be able to do that is to use language in which the other people know what the language is for. Because guess what? As a dyslexic myself, I know how important it is that if you use big words on me that I have no idea what's going on, then I'm not going to understand you. It's just not going to happen. But if you use words that are simple, use words that are common to me, then we can have a great conversation. And a lot of times when we are in our fields, I'm talking to you as champions, when we are in our fields, marketing, finance, banking, personal development, coaching, fitness and health, whatever industry it is, the more we become an expert, the more that we understand the terms and words that are in there. And as we understand more of the vocabulary that goes into our industry, well, then we ourselves understand it, but our audience don't understand that vocabulary. They don't understand those words that are going on. And so the best thing to do is to, in the nicest way possible of wording, to dumb it down. Because when you dumb it down and you use simple words, then they know what's going on. You know what's going on. And then ultimately, everybody knows what's going on, and you'll be able to sell them or market to them or whatever it is. Change your vocabulary, make it more simple, and it's going to help you out in the long run when it comes to meeting with your audience. John, I'd love to hear your thoughts about vocabulary, about going and meeting people in their language.
Isn't communication like super important? And we don't give it enough credit. And oftentimes it is the one skill set that we lack the most. In my opinion, like skill sets, the skill set of communication is one of those things where if you can boil down every little problem that we have, like relationships or things in life, it all comes down to how we communicate. And it's not just verbal communication, but it's, body language, impressions, implications, all that stuff. That's all part of it. And I love what you were saying because, yeah, our vocabulary is vital. And I'd say that vocabulary and like physically speaking is a huge percentage of how we talk. But meeting people where they're at, that's like business and sales 101 as well, because it's understanding who you're talking to. It's public speaking 101, right? It's know your audience, and don't just show up and and let's say you're in Utah, and you have a bunch of jokes prepared that are based on Texas. Like, that's not going to work. You're basically gambling that one person in the audience might have connections to Texas and might get your jokes. So, you have to adjust your language. Now, there are all sorts, like dozens and dozens of personality assessments out there in the world to help you kind of identify different personalities or various people, and then they have these results that help you to decide what kind of language you should use when talking to people, especially in the world of sales, or especially in the world of marketing and advertising. It's an interesting world out there. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like, your language is important. And someone said to me once, and I thought it was really cool, that if I have nothing else, at least I have my word. And if I have my word, that's all I have. And I remember that and thinking, wow, I mean, material possessions in this world are great. We feel proud of the work we do, and the money we earn, and the money we spend on the things we want. And those material things feel great. But when it comes to our word, at the end of the day, that's all we have. That's truly all we have. And using our word to communicate is important. Before I go off on any tangents, I'll pass it back over to you. But I do want to get into like this idea of language, because it starts up here, right? Bob Proctor talks about how thoughts are things, and I love that, because thoughts are things. But then when transmuted to written form, those words become physical things. When spoken to in connection, you're creating, and that power of creation, whether we do lackadaisically or intentionally, has a huge impact on who and how we influence through our word. And so it comes full circle for me. So language is a huge piece. And just to kind of kick things off, I think being very particular about what you say is important, let alone knowing what you're saying to who you're talking to is going to make a big difference, because not everyone is receiving what you're throwing. Not everyone's catching what you're tossing. And that's because you've got to know who you're talking to. You know who you're talking to. As my best impression of what a New Yorker said to me once.
That you hear it here. That is what a New Yorker sounds like. Boom, there you go. the visual that, John, when you were talking about throwing food, people not catching it, I imagined I don't know why I went to like a prison lunchroom, but like, you're at prison, you got your tray of food, and a lot healthier than what I've seen on movies of what prison food. But they have this like head of cabbage for some reason, and they're like, you're chucking this the one prisoner's chucking this cabbage across the room, and the other prisoners are like trying to catch it. I don't know why that visual came to my mind, but that's what it is. Back to language. It's like it's on a line. Line is so simple. Maybe that's the language I need to use. It's on a line. You have this side, on video form. This side, you have the beginning of beginner, of novice, to where they don't know the language of the industry, right? If this line is from novice to mastery, as a novice, you just don't know the language. And when you don't know the language, you don't know the vocabulary, it really shows when you're talking with somebody who does. Then you get a little more experience, and you get to this middle part, which then you start to learn the vocabulary. But I think when people are in this middle part, they overcompensate for what they're doing because they want to feel like they're the expert. And so they use all these big words, they use the jargon, and the people who have been in there understand them, but most of their customers don't, because they just don't know the words. Think of it like a car salesman. They might talk about horsepower and the transmission. They might talk about different makes and models. But if I were to go to a car dealership, I'm just like, that car's dark blue. That's a cool car. And they're just like, oh yeah, we got horsepower and transmission. I'm like, you lost me. You lost me with the car. I tend to overcompensate in that middle part. But then you learn this principle that we're talking about of use their language. Not dial it down, but transfer your energy into words they know so that you can find that common ground, understand each other. And then you move up the scale to a master. The master is able to teach a 4-year-old rocket science. The master is able to use the language to affect everybody. And that's so important as we dive more into this conversation of language, of are you able to, in the industry that you're in as a champion, you people who are listening, are you able to teach a 4-year-old what you do? If you do, awesome, well done. But if you're like most of us, I think a lot of us can learn a little bit more on how to dial down our language to still reflect the energy and principles we're trying to share to a 4-year-old. I think you truly can become a master with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I just had this really cool image of a
A
4-year-old
cabbage and a 4-year-old.
and this is how much I know about kids. A 4-year-old in their high chair. I don't think that's a thing. I think it's like maybe, I don't know, it depends on how
Yeah,
little
yeah,
in their
4-year-olds.
high chair,
Yeah,
and you're about
4-year-olds
to
could be in the
feed
high chair.
them,
Yeah,
and you're having family dinner with them, and as you're feeding them, they you're having a conversation explaining to them what you do for work, right? And anyways, that's a good visual, and I like that because they say this is kind of a cool principle. They say if you want to become an expert in your space, read at least 10 books in your industry, and you'll already be, far along the way of thought leadership above the rest of the people who you work with, or the people in your industry. And I was like, yeah, but that's because you're obtaining knowledge, you're obtaining information, you're getting a deeper sense of the position. Of course, you need experience. And then, of course, in order to transition to communicating to the right people in the right way, you've got to have practice of, yeah, for lack of better words, dumb it down, but to focus on the type of language that they'll receive. And I love that, because now what we get into is we get into the idea that, hey, how, what are the application steps? Like, what experience do you guys have, John and Willie, of meeting people where they're at? And sometimes, like, I start with questions. Like, it's more about them than it is about us and what we say, because they'll tell you everything you need to know. And that's more of like a sales conversation. But in the context of this book, oversubscribed and focusing on bringing people to you, having them lines out the door for you, your service, and what you're doing. Um, you've got to find out what they want and what they need. And my music teacher in junior high used to say, listen with your eyes and your ears. And by listening with your eyes, you're observing both the musical conductor as they're conducting the music. You're also looking at the language that the flutes and the trombones and the percussions are saying. Their body language and their overall awareness is important. And if I really think about this as I figure out what I really want to communicate here, is it is about awareness. It's not just about delivery. It's not just about, we're not Olympic athletes showing up to perform one task at one given time to perform an amazing athletic performance. Instead, we're feeding off of what's happening around us. So when it comes to your audience, the people you're talking to, know where they're at, speak to their needs, and watch them come and line up in droves. And I think that that's the ideal goal here. And if you can do that, well, you got yourself a business, and people will come. Just because you put up a lemonade stand does not guarantee you'll have customers, because you didn't. Where'd you put the lemonade stand? If you're on a lonely highway, I don't think you're going to get many customers. But if you go to where they're at, I think a hot plaza in the middle of a busy park, that's going to get you some customers. You're definitely going to have an increase, and it's going to speak their language on a hot day. So I think that's important. And I feel like we could beat this topic really down. Like, we're really splintering it out and really giving some in-depth conversations. So you're welcome to those who read this book and then listen to this podcast and then realize that we're giving you a lot.
Let's jump into the practical side for like a few examples so we can solidify this even more. Let's jump into public speaking. The number one fear around the world, public speaking. I'm going to attempt to teach the people who are listening about public speaking, but using the big jargon words that we do as public speakers. And then, John, I know that you are international public speaker, but if you try to pretend that you're just getting in this industry, and in the words that I speak, and I hope I can come up with a lot, see which ones you're just like, oh, I know that one, but I don't know the other 90% of the words that you said. So if I were to be, let's say, in front of a class teaching about public speaking, I'd start going about, you got to have presence. You got to make sure that your energy level is at an 8 or a 9. And as you speak, you need to be able to have the power pose in which you assert the dominance and the confidence that you need to be able to present the lecture or the speech in which you're giving. And as you're up there, make sure that you know the industry you're talking about, the niche in which you're going to describe, because you might lose everybody in the audience if you start going off on different tangents. I'll stop it right there. But just off those, John, I know you're a master. But are there any words that came up that you're like, if a new person coming into our industry of public speaking were to hear, they would just be completely lost?
Well, while you were sharing that, after you talked about energy and presence, there was a other long list of examples and thoughts. And if I were a newbie, right, I would first be thinking about that big fear of public speaking, and then presence and energy, and then everything else would have just blurred. And for me, in the public speaking space, when teaching a newbie, a newbie speaker, we'll call them future pro, they're going to worry about the minutia. They're going to worry about the little things leading up to that. And so, in my opinion, it's one little thing at a time. And so, for me, I not that I would have done it differently or better, because I loved everything you said. I think when it comes to practicing and teaching and communicating the skill sets of public speaking, you focus in on one little thing at a time and then practice it. And it's going to take a lot of time. You and I both know this. You and I have been sculpting our public speaking abilities for years now. And each sculpting session is not transformational. Just because I used a couple big words or some really cool energy doesn't change the fact that I still have a lot to learn. And so therefore, I have a little to figure out every single time. And most of the time, it comes back to me as, okay, I felt good speaking, but did I have an out? Did I have, did it resonate? Did it reach my audience well? And so I do like that. Um, and to finish up, kind of answer to your question is, yeah, there were a lot of great words in there, but for a beginner, I feel like what they need to know is, one, they are nobody knows what they're going to say. So therefore, there is no fear necessary of messing up, because nobody knows what you're talking about until you talk about it. And so, first and foremost, it's to talk like you've never shared this with them before, and they will not judge. And I've seen that. Like, you've seen people, like, they get up there and they're all like, "Oh, okay, I haven't practiced this," or like, this. They have to share context, and they want to make sure it makes sense to the audience before they even share it. But that's the thing, is it will make sense when you show up. And you said that your presence matters, your energy matters. One last example, and I'll pass it back over to you. Impromptu here. I'm going to give a speech on the power of compassionate communication. And compassionate communication can be understood by everyone else, but I know that when I begin this speech, that I need to capture the attention of my audience and speak their language, whoever they are. Now, this is a shot in the dark, so I'm going to clearly miss people, but I'm going to say, have you ever been talked down to when all you needed was a hug? I know I have. And that right there was the moment I realized that people are going through their own stuff. And that when I need something from somebody, that compassion that I seek from others is probably what they need more. So rather than receiving compassion, I realize I should probably give it in order to receive it. End beginning of speech, right? Energy, presence, and hey, let's resonate with the audience. Because if it's not something that you want, if it's something that you want to teach, maybe you put them in the shoes of the person who needs to learn the lesson, if that makes sense. So I think that when it comes to communication, it has nothing to do with our opinions, our expertise and knowledge. No one cares. No one cares what we know. And you always know the famous adage, right? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I would add to that adage and say, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And then they might care about what you know. There's a gamble there. It might be, but they just want to know you care. That's all that matters. So I believe that when it comes to public speaking and communication, compassion and caring truly are at the foundation of creating what you want to create. That was a long tangent and a long description of your answer. You probably just asked me, what time is it, and I gave you that. But that's that's what I did.
But that's what we do on this show. We go off on tangents. No,
That's right.
thank you. Thank you for what you shared. It you hit on something that's not talked about a lot, which is the nonverbal communication that goes on between others. Because of course you have the words that are shared, but then when you have it met by the body language, met by the tone, met by the your presence, your energy, what you're giving, your passion. Like when you combine it together, it's not just about the words. It's about everything in its entirety. It's the same reason why it's so hard to get context when you send a text message to someone. Is because you don't get their tone. You don't get the way that they say it. Or right now, I'm emailing back and forth a company about some legal stuff, and it seems like every time that I read it, It's just like they're saying things that are just bold and passive aggressive. And I'm sure that on the other side, when I send it to them, I don't mean it at all. I'm just like, no, these are just the facts. This is just what's going on. But they might read it as passive aggressive. So it's just like when it's just words, communication can just I don't know why wibble wobble is the word that comes to mind, but it's not solidified. It's not solid. But when you add the nonverbal and you add the tone and you add everything else, the nonverbal communication, then it completes the picture. Then you get an overview of what's actually going on. So, as we are wrapping up this episode and talking about language, of course, is about the words that you use, and you got to dial it down to keep it simple. And it also matters about the nonverbal. Because, all in all, communication, when you bring all of it together, that's where the experts and the mastery comes into.
I want to jump into and add something, Willie, as we kind of wrap this up, is that there is no magic switch. You've got to learn language, and you've got to learn how to use language correctly to address the right audiences. And so one of the feelings I had when I started reading this book and when I started reading this chapter, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get a list of words and vocabulary that's going to help me become a millionaire. I know exactly what's going to teach me. And I started feeling this overexcitement of like, oh, it's just it's a quick, like, if I memorize these words, then I'm going to be unstoppable, right? Or people will line up for my businesses. And that's just not the case, guys. And I don't want you to feel, I don't want you to feel that way and then find yourself empty-handed once you realize it's not there. I want you to feel like there is what Willie just said, like there is mastery, there is practice, there is communication, there is relationships that go into the intention behind everything. And that's a powerful principle. And I get carried away. I get caught up in being a consumer sometimes, and I just get so excited about the outcomes. I literally just saved a video by Alex Hermosi, and I was like super excited about this free event that he advertised and the stuff that he's giving away for it. And I thought, yeah. So if I attend this, my business will be $100 million in value. And the reality is that's how it made me feel, but that's not going to be the outcome of me attending a free event, right? And so for me, it's language is everything, but you also got to check your emotions at the door and realize like, hey, this is how communication works. It does make you feel stuff. It moves you to action. It gets you what you want, and it gets other people what they want, bringing in a little bit of how to win friends and influence people, right? Our language is everything. So as you read this book, know that, yeah, there are some great vocabularies and words and phrases, but it's different depending on your world, your industry, and your background. But focus in on how and what and the delivery of what you're sharing with other people to get them to oversubscribe to you, to get them so pumped in, dialed in that it'll give you so much. I'm actually getting like a ton of really great ideas just from this conversation. So I actually encourage our listeners, like, talk to somebody about your industry who has no idea, and ask them if you can practice, like, talking about what you do to others so that they understand, and give it a go several times. Be like, are you willing to just like work with me and practice with me? Because I need to make it make sense. And one more adage to just throw in there: doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting different results is what we defined as insanity, right? Do the same thing over and over by finding ways to fine tune it and make it better each time. That's not insanity, but that is sanity, and creating what Willie called mastery. So there's my final thought.
Love it. And with that, champions, that wraps up another episode of Champion Reads. If you found inspiration in this episode, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, as well as you can go to our website, mychampionscircle.com, where you'll be able to find the link to our podcast, link to our socials, and everything else going in the Champion Circle universe. Until next time, champions, continue to be the champion of your life, be the best version of yourself, and always remember, take the time to go out and practice your communication, whether it's your language, your verbal, or your nonverbal. We'll see you on the next episode of Champion Reads.